Oh shit. Okay, now we live. Hey, shalom, shalom,
Shalom.
shalom makam, which is peace unto you all. Hi, hayawam tawab la atam, which is good day unto you all. Anak na wahai bar shalay with the Hebrew Israelites coming to you week in and week out through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, the preach to so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, West Indians, Haitians, and Israelite foreigners. Nachamatam kaya, hamalakata shabayim kwa rab, repent ye for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. First and foremost, before we get started, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rocha, Kodash. While double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone that taught us his truth and rule well, and much respect to you bros out there pushing his truth with all righteousness and sincere shalom, shalom.
Shalom.
So just as the lesson is entitled, it says the bitters must touch your tongue. We can't avoid it, or you can't avoid it, because in this walk, essentially, we'll essentially be tested, So I want to start with a quick precept.
Mm-hmm.
This is start with Bon Sirach, chapter 2. And we'll get verse 1. It says, my son, if thou come to serve the Lord, prepare thy soul for temptation. Pretty much going into the straight gate, because on the straight gate, it's different obstacles that are meant to try us, because the Lord is essentially removing those impurities from us. All right. It says, set thy heart aright. Hey, shalom, shalom, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shah Bahasham, Chakodash Brakatam. It says, set thy heart aright and constantly endure and make not haste in the time of trouble. And ultimately how we set our heart aright is ultimately by being prepared, preparing in the Lord, Yahweh Shai, buckling down and relying on the Lord, It says, cleave unto him and depart not away, that thou mayest be increased at thy last end. And how we ultimately cleave unto the Lord is essentially, through prayer, fasting, and reading, going to the secret place of the Lord, which is the scriptures,
Mm-hmm.
So it says, whatsoever is brought upon thee, take cheerfully, and be patient when thou art changed to a low estate. Patient means to suffer. So ultimately, don't be in a rush to get up out of the fire. It says, for gold is tried in the fire, and acceptable men in the furnace of adversity. I'm reading again. It says, for gold is tried in the fire. When a goldsmith is making some gold, essentially, he'll put it into the fire. And then when he's ultimately able to see his reflection, then he'll take it out, because that's a good piece of gold right there. So that's essentially what the Lord is doing. So it says, for gold is tried in the fire, and acceptable men in the furnace of adversity. So our smelting process, our defining process, for the elect is ultimately going through those different adversities. You see, because the adversities take out those impurities, that's not needed. The Lord is turning men into fine gold. Pursuant to Yashaya Isaiah, the 32nd chapter.
Mm-hmm. If I may add to your point too, because when you look at gold that comes out the earth, a lot of it is filled with impurities.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it has some iron, has some tin, has certain metals that needs to be purged out. And the way you do it is by fire. In the same manner, we got impurities, being in the world for as long as we have, being in this flesh as well. We're constantly subject to impurities and corruption. So, the Most High has to constantly put us in that fire, put us in that smelting pot in order to, purge all that out of us. Right. And it's painful, it hurts, it can be bitter at times,
Mm-hmm.
but it's all for the betterment. It's all for for the good of the body, because we're part of the body of Yahweh Shah HaMashiach. So, in order to be part of the body, be joined into that body, we have to be pure, because Yahweh Shah is pure. He demands perfection. So we got to be, in a sense, perfect as well, and the Most High is doing that through the fiery trials that he's putting us through. May I get a quick one real quick?
Yeah, you got
it. This is James 1, and I'm going to start at verse 2. It says, my brethren, count it all joy when ye fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. Right? Because we read in Bon Sirach, the second chapter in the first verse, it says to prepare thy soul for temptation. So these are things we're going to come across: adversity, trials, tribulation, right? But we got to understand that this is all part of the walk. This is part of that purging process and to make it into the kingdom of heaven. You know,
Right. And I
and
want to, you good.
Con, you got it, bro. Go ahead.
I didn't want to cut you off. You finish your point.
Con, I just wanted to add also is that, you know, because like I said, it's a process. It's a purging process that needs to take place, and ultimately, whenever our Lord Yahushua returns, we can be, you know, perfect. You know, we can be, you know, them reflective pieces of gold, you know, that shines and reflects the image of the Lord. But you got it, bro.
All right. I want to get this word because in the title it says the bitters must touch your tongue. You can't avoid it. So I want to get that word for taste. This is ultimately going to taste. You know, when you taste something, you're perceiving it. So let's get this. This is the word for taste, and it says salat. Hold on. If bros had a preset, y'all go ahead and get him. I'm trying to find this word.
Real quick. Just laying back off, you know, the point Yeshaya had made. This is Hebrews 12:11. Now no chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous, but grievous. Right now, word grievous can lend itself back to being bitter, man. Right, to be, you know, painful, you know, something that's unenjoyable at the time. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Nevertheless, afterward it yielded the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised by it. Right. So you have to be exercised in this bitter. Right. You have to be a partaker of the bitter to understand and to be able to receive that peaceable fruit. Right. To be able to appreciate it. You know, that's why the Lord put us in these situations so that, you know, we can see that we're with the qualities that He didn't want in us, right, are being removed, right, regardless of the circumstances they get removed by, man. But it's also the, you know, the spirit that brothers are, you know, making mention throughout the week, that it's, you need to make that change before the Lord pretty much forces that change, man. You know,
Mm-hmm.
because it's gonna be, you know, a heavy-handed, you know, if the Lord has to get involved, man. You know, it's not gonna be something that uh, that's gonna be without a great deal of suffering, man.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I
That's
got that
right.
word. Ta'aim. H2938. I put it in the comment, but it says Ta'aim H2938 says to taste, perceive, eat, to taste. It says figuratively to perceive, and then it says taste. I'm gonna go down to the Strong's lexicon. It says to perceive mentally or spiritually. It says perceive by the taste or flavor. You know, so essentially we read about, you know, the scriptures. You see, and we're ultimately walking them. You know, when we go through the different trials and tribulations, you see, because scriptures say, you know, a man of experience will declare wisdom. So by the different experiences, we ultimately can declare that wisdom, and at the same time, simultaneously, essentially, is removing them impurities. Because pursuant to the Haryam Psalms 119:9 says, wherewithal, let me get it real fast. This is Psalms chapter 119 and verse 9, and it says, Bayat, which is your house, it says, wherewithal shall a young man cleanse his way? By taking heed thereto, according to thy word. So those different experiences, you know, that we go through, essentially, it's removing those impurities, and ultimately we're putting on the scriptures. You know, it mentally going into that word for time, which is to perceive, it mentally and spiritually becomes a part of you, you know, through the spirit.
That's right.
Con.
So from there, could we get that? Yeah, right here. It says, cause we're talking about the bitters. It says, Mar. You scroll down just a little bit, Baba Kusha.
Con.
It'll be my raw. Yeah, right there. It says the head waters of a river are only a trickle and have stagnant pools, causing the water to be bitter. Rebellion is one with a bitter attitude because it goes both into the bitterness and it also goes into rebellion. Hence, Maratayam, which is another name for America. All right, double rebellion and also double bitterness. Because for the double rebellion, America is going to receive of that double bitterness. All right, with the ICBM nukes. So could we also get that picture, Baba Kushal, just to tie it into the title? So it said the head waters of the river would be pretty much bitter. So you got the Ma is Mayam, that's the water, and then Ra is Ra'ash, which is the head. So Mar or Marar, all right, Mar goes into the head waters. So the head of a river at the top where the brown and the white part is, it said it started as a trickle, you know, because it's smart. It starts small from the mountain, and it goes down and it turns into a river. So those head waters, The water don't start off clean. It's very bitter. So the rocks and the filtration process essentially cleans the water as it goes down. So that part right there is known as the bitterness. That's why it's known as mar or marar. Because you get that picture bubble shot for I believe it was marar.
Con.
And it says, can you zoom in a little bit? Bubble shot. And it says, Ma says the water, thus chaos, mighty. And then it says blood. But in this particular word, it's going into Mayam, which is the water. It says Ra'ash, the head of man, thus head, first, top, beginning, man. It says Ra'ash again. And it says the head of man, head, first, top, beginning. And it says man. It says the story being told, because when you go into each Hebrew word, it goes into a story. So it says the story being told is water at the head, which is the river's beginning. So pretty much the head water is it's at the beginning. That's essentially where you located at. It says the head waters of a river, according to ancient Hebrew lexicon, the head waters of a river are only a trickle and have stagnant pools, causing the water to be bitter. It says the concrete now is bitter thing, which is bitter of taste, which is of a bitter taste, but the abstract concept is weakness. So those pretty much, because from the bitterness, another meaning for that right here, I'm gonna get it real fast. Give me a second. All right, it's the word for bitter. And it says, hold on, right here. And it says to be bitter, to show bitterness, to make bitter. It says embitter, to embitter oneself, to be enraged, to be strong, to strengthen. So it said right here, it says the concrete, it says but the abstract concept is weakness, so you will put something bitter on a thing to make it stronger, hence if you take bitter herbs, ultimately as soon as you perceive it, you like, nah, like you the taste buds and stuff, it make you want to spit it right back out, like you got I believe you got glands and stuff on your tongue, and so essentially it make all that dirt and that spit and stuff like that, you start spitting up stuff, make you go to use the bathroom, so it's getting those impurities, those weaknesses out of you, but ultimately in the end it make you stronger, so that's
right.
That's why I said right here, it says to be strong, to strengthen, because really, I mean, if you like, if it was like, yeah, do you want to eat these bitters, just average person, they probably be like, nah, because like it tastes disgusting, but ultimately it makes you better, and we should embrace that bitter process. Going back to Sirach, the second chapter, it said take thee cheerfully, because ultimately, yeah, it feel like shit, like it sucks, but ultimately in the end it makes you a better person,
Right. Con. Hey, may I get a precept for you?
It's a lot. If I get this real fast,
Con.
The brother priest, I'm on. Pretty much, it says the bitter buds are on the back of your tongue. So yeah, if you feel it, and then it make you like pretty much spit it up.
Con. This is Ecclesiastes 7 and verse 2. It says, "It is better to go into the house of mourning than to go into the house of feasting, for that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to his heart." So it continues on. It says, "Sorrow is better than laughter, but by the sadness of the countenance, the heart is made better." So that bitter, when you're going through the trials of certain tribulations, certain troubles, you start to pretty much analyze yourself. You start to look at yourself and self-analyze, reflect on what it is that you did wrong and try to correct that. And in the same manner, like you mentioned, the bitters, the body will, you put that bitter horseradish or whatever it is that you take in that's bitter, your stomach will be like, yo, what the hell is this? And try to push it out. And pretty much it helps heal the body. It helps push and activate the body to where it can actually work, like the digestive system you mentioned, right? A lot of people are so stopped up with goddamn the damn comfort foods that your body just stays stagnant. It's not even activated. It's just sitting there. So with that bitter, it helps to activate the body to push all that shit out, which eventually makes you feel better after you end up taking the bitter.
I got a precept for you. This is Mashallah, Proverbs 25 and 4. It says, take away the dross from the silver, and there shall come forth a vessel for the finer. I want to get this word for dross, and it says sayag, and it says scoria dross. It says take away the dross from the silver. It says baser metal, which having been mixed with purer, is separated from it by melting. So that process, essentially taking away those impurities, because that's what the baser parts are pretty much being removed. The parts that the bad parts, the stuff that we essentially picked up on in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also get this too. This is Mashal, Proverbs chapter 17, and we'll get verse 3, and it says, "The finding pot is the finding pot is for silver, and the furnace for gold, but the Lord trieth the hearts." All right, I'm gonna get another one too, because essentially what the Lord is doing is trying our mind, because anybody can say, yeah, they want to do this, yeah, they want to do that, but ultimately, the Lord wants those that truly feels it in their inward parts. All right, not just putting on a show. All right, this is Dabaryam, Deuteronomy chapter 8 and verse 2. It says, "And thou shalt remember all the way which the Lord thy power led thee these 40 years in the wilderness, to humble thee and to prove thee." All right, ultimately going to let me get this word for prove real fast. This prove goes into some type of testing, and it says Nasa says to test, to prove, to assay. It says put to the proof or test. Essentially the elect is being put to the test. So it says, "And thou shalt remember all the way which the Lord thy power led thee these 40 years in the wilderness, to humble thee and to prove thee, to know what was in thine heart." Because before honor is humility, and the word for humility goes into humiliation. All right, and that humiliation process is that that bitterness. So it says, "To humble thee and to prove thee, to know what was in thine heart, whether thou wouldest keep his commandments or no. And he humbled thee and suffered thee to hunger, and fed thee with manna which thou knewest not, neither did thy fathers know, that he might make thee know that man doeth not live by bread only, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of the Lord doeth man live." So ultimately, the Lord is testing us to see ultimately what's in our mind, because essentially we live by these scriptures.
Right. I got one for you real quick.
Mm-hmm.
This is Job chapter 23, and I'll start at verse 8. It reads, "Behold, I go forward, but he is not there, and backward, but I cannot perceive him. On the left hand where he doth work, but I cannot behold him. He hideth himself on the right hand, that I cannot see him." Verse 10, the point. "But he knoweth the way that I take. When he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. My foot hath held his steps, his way have I kept, and not declined." So going back to, that trying, the Lord puts us in positions where, much like Yahweh Shai during his moment in the Garden of Gethsemane, right, where he's putting us through a test, right? And you may cry out, but you won't receive an immediate answer, man, right? But he's still there, right? He's still guiding your path. He's just putting you through that trial, like brothers that may have mentioned, so you can come forth as gold, man. And you have to continue to prove and continue to pass those tests, right, as you continue this walk, right? And they're going to continue to intensify, but that's just going to be more and more for our betterment, man.
Right. Hey, if I may add to your point too, I got a precept right here. I'm gonna read this real quick. This is 1 Peter 4:12. It says, "Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened to you. But rejoice, inasmuch as ye are partakers of Hamashiach's suffering, that when his glory shall be revealed, ye may be glad also with exceeding joy." So as the brother mentioned, Yahweh Shai went through these things, and us, we're pretty much coming up and sort of in his stead. You know what I'm saying? Now that he's up in the heavens, we're out here, continuing that work. And in that work, we're gonna go through the similar things, similar trials that Yahweh Shai went through, right? Now, of course, Yahweh Shai went through a much heavier burden because who he is, but we have our own, certain weight that we got to carry in this walk as well. But we're a part of that of Hamashiach's suffering. You know, the scriptures talk about in John 15, right, verse 20, I believe. It's pretty much going roughly paraphrasing. It says, "The servant is not greater than his Lord."
Mhm.
Right. So if he went through it, we're gonna go through it too. But this is all like if we chose to walk in this through this path, so you know, Yahweh Shah being that trailblazer, we're gonna go through the same walk that he did and go through the same trials, the same tribulations, the same testings as he went through. Now, it was bitter, but it's bitter, but ultimately it's all to fashion us in the same manner as Yahweh Shah.
Right.
I got one. This is 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 6. It says, wherein it greatly rejoice, though now for a season, if need be, ye are in heaviness through manifold temptations. I'm gonna get this word for heaviness real fast. It says G3076, it says to make sorrowful, to affect with sadness, cause grief, to make one uneasy, cause him a scruple. And something about being uneasy, you know, essentially that's when you know, we can grow, you know, because if you're always comfortable, no growth comes from comfortability. It has to be some type of obstacle or something, some type of difficult situation ultimately to get to that next level.
Right.
So it says
Right.
to
Stagnation.
distress. It says to distress reflexively or passively, to be sad, cause grief. It says to grieve. Let me keep going though. It says, I'm gonna read it again. It says, wherein ye greatly rejoice, though now for a season, if need be, ye are in heaviness through manifold temptations. Again, because you know, we're going through the different tests, are ultimately so that we can grow. You know, it says, verse 7, that the trial of your faith, being much more precious than gold, than of gold that perisheth, though it be tried with fire, might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Yahweh Shah HaMashiach. You know, so ultimately, the goal is not just to, you know, hop into the fire and then hop right back out, or to, you know, go back into the world. Essentially, the goal is ultimately, you know, when the Lord comes back, you know, that we, you know, receive those crowns and that we ultimately receive that salvation. I want to get this word for temptations, though. It says G3986. It says an experiment, attempt, trial, proving. I'm going to skip down. It says the trial of man's fidelity, integrity, virtue, constancy. It says an enticement to sin, temptation, whether arising from the desires or from the outward circumstances. It says of the condition of things or a mental state by which we are enticed to sin or to lapse from the faith and holiness. It says adversity, affliction, trouble sent by the Most High and serving to test or prove one's character, faith, holiness. Because the Lord not looking for the Lord ain't never dealt with no numbers. You know, the Lord deals with those that ultimately show that that true character. You know, someone that has virtue. You know, holiness. The ones that are 10 toes about Him. I'm gonna get this real fast. This is First Ezra chapter 4, and we'll get verse. I think it's 27. Bros, know where it say, "Did not begin to commend those that stood so stiffly."
The second address 2:47.
Okay, yeah.
I got you right here.
Okay.
It's second address chapter 2 and verse 47. So he answered and said unto me, it's like, it is the Son of the Most High, whom they have confessed in the world. Then began I greatly to command them that stood so stiffly for the name of Yahweh Shema Shai.
Right, it says, then he answered and said unto me, it is the Son of the Most High, talking about Yahweh Shai HaMashiach, whom they have confessed in the world. All right, and that confession, all right, is not just going to be something that's like we spoke about it. You know, it's going to be something that we ultimately felt. You know, I don't want to say, you know, we continue until the end, but the elect is going to feel it. All right, it's not just going to be something that you speak about. It's going to be something that you speak about and you feel it. All right, both of those. So it says, then began I greatly to commend them that stood so stiffly for the name of the Lord. You know, standing stiff mean that, again, going back to being 10 toes, to being rooted, to be established and having that true character. You know, going into I'm gonna get it real fast. This is Matthew. Hey, bros, ain't had nothing.
You got that.
Okay, this is Matthew chapter 7. And verse 24 says, therefore, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man which built his house upon a rock. It said, doeth them, you know. It says, and the rain descended. And so like it says, I would liken him unto a wise man which built his house upon a rock, that rock being Yahweh Shai Hamashayach. It says, and the rain descended, and the floods came, and the wind blew and beat upon that house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. All right, and that rock, all right, the rock is Yahweh Shai. Ultimately, we receive of that stability, that establishment. All right, so that we can stand stiff. You know, ultimately going back to that character, that virtue. You know.
That's right. May I get a precept for you? Pretty much reading the precept that priest put up. This is Ecclesiastes 1:18. It says, "For in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increases knowledge increases sorrow." Right. So, if you try to attain to the masteries, try to eat the whole roll, you're gonna go through, certain reflections and thoughts in your mind of, because the scriptures, it talks about how this roll is sweet in your mouth, but as soon as it hits your belly, it's bitter.
I got it right here if you want me to get it.
Con, you can go ahead.
Con, this is Ezekiel chapter 3 and verse 1. It says, "Moreover, he said unto me, Son of man, eat that thou findest, eat this roll, and go speak into the house of Yasha'Allah." So I opened my mouth, in which the roll is talking about the scriptures.
Right.
It says, so I opened my mouth, and he caused me to eat that roll. And he said unto me, Son of man, cause thy belly to eat. I'm sorry, verse 2 again, it says, so I opened my mouth, and he caused me to eat that roll, because it's something that we got to take in. We got to ingest it. It got to become a part of us.
Right.
It says, and he said unto me, Son of man, cause thy belly to eat, and fill thy bowels with this roll that I give thee. Then did I eat it, and it was in my mouth as honey for sweetness. Oh, you want it the revelation, right? Or
yeah, but I believe that one also is pretty good too. I don't know if it continues to go into it.
I got it right here if you want me to get it.
Con, yeah, you can touch on that.
Con, it's Revelation chapter 10 and verse 10. It says, "And I took the little book out of the angel's hand and ate it up, and it was in my mouth, and it was in my mouth sweet as honey. And as soon as I had eaten it, my belly was bitter."
Right, and that's essentially what the priest put up, with Ecclesiastes 1:18. Right, the more you pretty much put your mind to the scriptures, you're going to come to the realization of how the world actually works, how the Most High arrange things, and pretty much also the path that you got to walk. And it's not the path that the world tells you. The world tells you, to do this way, the broad way. The scriptures talk about the broad path, easy, just cruising, do whatever you want. But when you come to the scriptures, the realization of the truth, you start to realize that, that was wrong. You gotta strive for salvation. You gotta put in work, man. It's hard work, and you're gonna see, different things like, family members, and especially in these times that we're coming into, family members might die off. Certain people ain't gonna get it. Friends, families gonna start looking at you sideways. A lot of that stuff is bitter. And I quoted that precept in John, I believe, where it says the servant is not greater than his Lord, because it says also they have persecuted me, they will persecute you also, and that's also part of the bitter. That your own people is going to come against you. But all this to say that you got to take in the bitter though, in order to attain the kingdom of heaven. And I believe we can get that here soon. I don't know if you have it on deck. Second Ezra, the 7th chapter.
Lie.
We can get that. As a matter of fact, I'll pull it up. But
I want to add to your point too.
You got it.
It said it was in my mouth as honey for sweetness, roughly paraphrasing. So the sweet part is, you're Israelite. Essentially the Lord has come to save His people. Or those that endure, will get the kingdom. Or and things as such. You see, in that bitter goes into, like you said, the persecution. The hell that we catch, the different adversities and stuff like that. That's why it's symbolic. Because the scriptures say, Hosea 12 and 10, the Lord speaks in similitudes. All right, this represents this. All right, this is a picture of this. So like when we eat the bitter herb, on Passover, essentially you chewing it, and it just hits you. So that's essentially how it is. That's how the scripture. That's how the straight gate is.
Mm-hmm. Salakia.
I was
just gonna say that's pretty much, you have to go through that process.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of that purification. That's
Mhm.
part of that straight gate. You know, you have to walk through that narrow path in order to reach, like the scriptures talk. As a matter of fact, let me get it. This is Second Ezra 7 and verse 6. It says, "There's also another thing. A city is builded and set upon a broad field, and is full of all good things. The entrance thereof is narrow, and is set in a dangerous place to fall, like as if there were a fire on the right hand, and on the left a deep water." So, brothers always mention that tightrope. A tightrope. You know, you have to be very careful how you navigate or how you walk on that tightrope, because you can easily slip and fall. Of course, the elect, they might slip, they might fall a little bit, but they're gonna pick themselves up and continue walking. But it just shows you the danger. What I'm saying, that little slip up, that little mishap can tip you over the edge, and you can fall either on that deep water or that fire, which is can equate to death. But also, when you look at fire and water, those are both cleansing agents,
Mhm.
right? Meant to cleanse you. So you gotta go through that cleansing in order to reach the end, as we can continue reading. But it says, I'm gonna read verse 7 again. It says, "The entrance thereof is narrow, and is set in a dangerous place to fall, like as if there were a fire on the right hand, and on the left a deep water, and only one path between them both, even between the fire and the water, so small that there could but one man go there at once. If this city now were given unto a man for an inheritance, if he never shall pass the danger set before it, how shall he receive this inheritance?" So there's no other way to receive the kingdom of heaven unless you go through that, man. Unless you take that path. And Yahushua being that trailblazer, we got to walk in those same steps as he did. You got something, Mark?
I was looking for a precept. Because pretty much, you mentioned Yahweh Shai being the trailblazer. It's not like we're walking this like we're walking this walk alone. Because we got the image, and we have the Lord Yahweh Shai, as the example. So we're to follow his footsteps.
Right. And I'm gonna add one more precept to this, just scrolling down, verse 18, because it's not like we're in this like walk alone, or even even through the tribulation. We're not the only ones going through hell. What I'm saying, 2/3 is also going through hell. But I'm gonna read this real quick. This is Second Ezra 7 and 18. It says, "Nevertheless, the righteous shall suffer straight things, and hope for the wide. For they that have done wickedly have suffered the straight things, and yet shall not see the wide." Because when you read in the book of Romans, the 11th chapter and the 26th verse, it goes into how all Israel shall be saved, right? Because all Israel is going to be in the kingdom of heaven. But you can either take that literal fire by the ICBM missiles, or you could take the trials, the fire through adversity, and make and come through it pure and be delivered. So you can either choose. You can choose. There's two ways to be purified, and and Israel's going to be purified by either one of those ways, right?
Can I get a
But
word for it?
Khan, you got it.
Con, you mentioned that fire. Let me get the word for fire. And you also mentioned that both fire and water is purifying agents. So let me get this real fast. This is the word for fire. It says a fire is made by firmly pressing a wooden rod down onto a wooden board and spinning the rod with a bow drill. Wood dust is generated from the two woods rubbing together and is heated by the friction, creating a small ember in the dust. Small tinder is then placed on the ember and igniting the tinder. It says the pictograph Ah, which is Alak, represents strength. The Shah as a picture of teeth, and implied pressing as one does with the teeth to chew food. And it says a strong pressing down. So pretty much it goes into strong pressure. So when we go into the different adversities, we're feeling that we're being cleansed by that water, which represents Yahweh Shai. Psalms 119 and 9. All right, and we're also being put into the furnace of adversity. So that represents the fire. So that fire is a strong pressing. So it's you being put to the test. It's not just pressing; it's a strong pressing. It's friction.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I got another one, and I got this from that video that I watched from the elders, and but Elder Yashwamba brought this out. This is Psalms 119 and 71. It says, "It is good for me that I have been afflicted, that I might learn thy statutes." Right. So it's a good thing to go through that bitter. You know, as we've been talking about throughout this whole video, man, that bitter will help you reflect, analyze yourself, help you pretty much is correction. You know, it's correction to bring you into the right path. You know, there's a scripture that goes into, you know, if the Most High, something along the lines of the Most High don't chasten you as a, so like if the Most High chasten you, that means he deals with you as a son. Right. So if you're able to perceive that correction, you know, because one thing is that the scripture also talk about, you know, how we have the 5 connotations thereof. It talks about the 6th and the 7th. Well, not all Jake has been given the ability of all those senses. You know, so some Jake, they'll go through the hell, begin the ass beat, but they can't perceive that it's ultimately how about Shimi Awashai that's doing it to them. You know?
Can you run that back?
Con, I can read it for you. This is Psalm 119 and 71. It says, "It is good for me that I have been afflicted, that I might learn thy statutes."
Right, because essentially, you know, we had mentioned pretty much we can read about it, you know, but the scripture said those that stood stiffly for the name of the Lord, you know. It said, can you run it back? It said, be afflicted so that we can learn the statutes. Because pretty much we're being tried and we put through those different adversities so that we essentially, we can feel it and we can ultimately, it could be an experience. It could be an experience that we got firsthand experience with it. You know, so with firsthand experience, you can ultimately break it down and you understand it. You know, you can perceive it, you know.
Con. Yeah, priest put it up. Let me read this real quick. Hebrews 12 and 5, it says, "And ye have forgotten the exhortation which speaketh unto you as unto children. My son, despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of him. For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth." That's right, man. Like, and that's exactly what the Most High is doing. You know, he's dealing with us as sons. So when you go through certain hell, you be like, yo, what did I do this time? But really, it's just you to reflect and continue to analyze, but also, you know, have that patience, right? Because you're being purified. But verse 7, it says, "If ye endure chastening, the Most High dealeth with you as with sons. For what son is he whom the Father chasteneth not?" Exactly, man. Because the scripture also continues on. It says, if he doesn't deal with you, he pretty much you're a bastard or something along those lines.
Yeah, I got you right here. It's Hebrews 12 and 8. "But if ye be without chastisement, whereof all are partakers, then are ye bastards and not sons."
Right, and that's why you see a lot of, you know, Jakes out here. You know, they be committing all kinds of really all kinds of manner of sin, man. And it seems like they'll never get their you know, their time of judgment. Right. But ultimately, you know, the Most High's letting them rack up them sins to the point where there's no point of return, and then the only option is to take them out. You know, because the scriptures talk about, you know, how do you deal with the rebellious son or rebellious child? You gotta put him to death, and that's what the Most High does in this level.
That's it.
I got one. This is Acts chapter 14 and verse 22. It says, "Confirming the souls of the disciples and exhorting them to continue in the faith, and that we through much tribulation much enter into the kingdom of the Most High." And that says confirming the souls of the disciples. When you go into the word for disciples, it means, you know, to be disciplined, you know, because ultimately through those different adversities, you know, we have to be disciplined and keeping ourselves to the standard of the scriptures. I want to get this word for confirming, excuse me. It says confirming. All right, con goes into with. All right, firm means to make strong, you know, because again, those the bitter part, you know, the different adversities, the afflictions will become stronger pursuant to it was the scripture that you have brought out. It was Psalms 119, I believe it was verse 71, because we were all able to learn, and when we're learning, essentially we're being built up, you know. So it says this word for confirming, it says to establish. All right, it says establish besides. It says strengthen more, to render more firm, confirm. It says to support further, i.e. reestablish, confirm, strengthen. All right, essentially, pursuant to Matthew the 7th chapter and the 24th verse. You know that rock. You know, essentially the elect is going to be abiding in the rock, which is Yahweh Shai.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. And if I may continue on in the Psalms, I just want to read the 72nd verse. It says, Psalms 119 and 72. It says, "The law of thy mouth is better unto me than thousands of gold and silver." Right? Because you come to the understanding that, you know, the law ultimately corrects you. It leads you to as the scriptures talk about in I can't remember. I think it's Psalms 23, how the Most High leads you to still waters.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, that's what the Most High is trying to do. You know, he's trying to guide us and give us that correction so we can walk, you know, in a better way. You know, instead of because the scripture also mentioned, you know, there's a wisdom that increases bitterness, and that's pretty much the rest of this world. The rest of this world is dealing with this wicked ass, you know, they call it wisdom, but all it does is add more sorrow to them. You know, it doesn't really help them. But when it comes to this truth, you know, we start finding peace. You know, we start to apply the scriptures. We start finding peace. It might be bitter at first, but the scriptures also talk about how how the how this truth pretty much leads us through crooked paths. You know, so at first it might be, you know, like a little turbulent, but once we start getting our footing, you know, we start to find that peace, start finding that, you know, that rest in our heart. But of course, it's a process. You know, and we're still being tried even till now, all the way up to the end. We're going to be tried, you know, but it's all for the betterment of us. You know what I'm saying? But I want to read this again, run it back. Psalms 119 and 72. It says, "The law of thy mouth is better unto me than thousands of gold and silver." Right? Because ultimately, you know, what Jake is missing is this word. You know, Jake over here, you know, you see Jake out here with all this money, you know, they're unsatiable. You know, that they have no boundaries, they have no discipline. But with this word, you attain that discipline, you attain that um I guess the right way to walk is can't really think of the right word. But
Moderation.
The what?
Moderation.
Right. You attain, you know, moderation, which even when we talk about like as a diet, you know, you can't just be constantly eating sweet things,
Right.
constantly eating just damn cakes and ice cream and candy and shit, man. You're gonna fucking throw up. You're gonna be, you know, sitting in the hospital bed soon enough.
Right. It's a balance, man.
Right.
Hey, going back to that, you know, it was sweet as honey, but in my stomach it was bitter. You know, that was the balance of that, man. Right? Because if the sweetness was like it made you want to consume more, right? But the more you consume, the more and more bitterness you experience, man. You know.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, Jake is they consuming all. It's a scripture that talks about that they consume it the honey, but then they end up throwing it up, roughly paraphrasing it. But that's the spirit that Jake is in. Like you said, they're insatiable, so they take all these things in, right? But they can't keep any of it down, man.
Right. Right. Kanye, and that's the reason why this law or the truth is actually that missing key, that key component that Jake is missing. Because you know you see Jake out here, man. They're just down and out, man. They're through. But once they come to the face to face to this truth, you know they try to, you know, shy away from it, you know, because it's bitter. It's bitter unto them.
Right.
You know, the scripture talks about in Hebrews 4 in the 12th verse how this word is quick and powerful, you know, and sharper than any two-edged sword. Right? It says because it cuts them. So they don't want to deal with the bitterness. They don't want to deal with the pain, the you know the fact that they have to correct themselves and change their ways because it's too hard for them, right? But that's the difference between, you know, 2/3 and the elect.
Yep.
Yeah, brother's got it.
That sword cuts both ways, man. You know, it's
Right.
like the scriptures talk about he is who is teaches many but is unprofitable to himself. Right? It's like all these lessons, you know, you're the first listener, right? You're the first one to to hear this and to apply it, right? So when you go into something like this, you're speaking on yourself first and foremost, right?
Right.
But the 2/3 and then these false prophets, they can't seem to grasp that, so they go out here, precept up, but they don't understand that they're cutting themselves in the process, man.
Mm-hmm.
God, priest had that precept up with bros wanted to I'll read it. It's Proverbs 20:25-16. It says, "Hast thou found honey? Eat so much as sufficient for thee, lest thou be filled therewith and vomited."
Right.
And which
Okay.
you got it.
I was like, eat as much as is sufficient for thee, man. We all know our limits on things, man. Right? But Jake has no discipline in the consumption of whatever it may be, So now you get to the point where you made yourself sick. Scriptures talk about using the word and not abusing it, and understanding that when you start to abuse things, that's when you get the adverse effects, of things taking place, man. Even in the bitterness, right? It can be to a point where you've afflicted yourself too much, right? And now you're starting to see adverse consequences, right? So that's why the Lord applied that balance to the situations, man.
I got a precept that's going into that. This is Psalms Tahalyam chapter 119 and verse 165. It says, "Great peace have they which love thy law, and nothing shall offend them." And which, the law teaches balance. The law teaches, it's peaceful. It gives us rest. It says, I'm gonna read it again. It says, "Great peace have they which love thy law." And when you love something, you're doing it. It's not something you just confess with your mouth. You're actually doing it. You're taking heed to it. It says that nothing shall offend them. And I want to get this word for offend. It's H4383, and it says Mashakawa, and it says cause to fall, offense. It says to ruin. Ultimately those that love the Lord's law are the elect. And essentially nothing's going to ruin them. Scriptures talk about how the elect isn't going to be taught or moved. Because essentially the elect have that true balance, that perfect balance. Essentially, because we love the law, we're doing the law. Again, we endure to the end.
That's right.
Yeah, that was all I had, bros. If y'all ain't nothing.
Kind of loud. That was it.
Conway, Adonai Tazaza Banaya Paulo's word, that was a beautiful application through the spirit. Well, Adonai Tazaza Adam Yashawam Tawab, as well. You have a good day. Well, we can go ahead and close it up by saying, Call Halayim La, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Rocha Kodash. While double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone that taught us this truth and rule well. And much respect to you, bros, that they're pushing this truth with all righteousness and sincere. Shalom, shalom. Shalom, lakam.
Shalom.